My name is Emily. I am 29 years old and I live in a small town in Pennsylvania. My town is the kind of place that feels painted from a memory, with quaint shops, a couple of churches whose bells still ring on the hour, and a train station that is almost always peaceful. Every street is lined with trees, and in the autumn, their leaves turn a brilliant golden red. I love walking under them after my workday ends. I live by myself in a small apartment. It has 2 rooms and a large window that looks out onto the main street. My mornings begin with black tea, which I sip by the window, watching people walk their dogs or carry crisp paper bags from the bakery down the block. Then, I catch the bus to work. I work in a modest office on the 2nd floor of an old brick building. Decades ago, it was a shoe store. Now, it's a landscape of desks, computers, and ever-present coffee cups. My desk is situated by the window, a small luxury I appreciate. I can see the bakery and, if I lean just right, the corner of the public library. For 3 years, every day felt like a copy of the one before. The office hummed with a quiet energy. People spoke in low voices, their keyboards clicking a steady rhythm. They would offer a polite good morning and a smile, and I would return the gesture. My job is not exciting, but it is calm, and I find comfort in that. I handle reports, answer emails, and ensure the daily workflow remains in order. I am not a person of many words. I simply do my work. Nothing ever changed. The same faces, the same responsibilities. Then, one winter day, we got a new manager. His name was Daniel. He was 38, wore soft gray sweaters and glasses that he often pushed up the bridge of his nose. His hair was a warm brown, and his eyes held a genuine kindness. He smiled when he spoke, a real smile that reached his eyes. On his first day, he made a point to visit every desk. When he arrived at mine, he said, "Hi, I'm Daniel. It's a real pleasure to meet you." I stood up, smoothing my skirt, and replied, "Nice to meet you, too." That was the entirety of our first conversation. But after he walked away, I found myself staring at the floor for a long moment, a strange, unfamiliar feeling stirring within me. Daniel changed the atmosphere of the office. Not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of consideration. He remembered everyone's name. He would ask people how they were doing and then actually listen to their response. He never made anyone feel incompetent. When someone made a mistake, he didn't get frustrated. He remained calm, offered help, and observed. He asked Olivia about her cat's health. He asked James how his son's soccer tournament went. And one day, he asked me if the tea in the break room was still the lemon kind I preferred. I was stunned he had noticed, let alone remembered. A few days later, he placed a small box of lemon tea bags on the corner of my desk. "I saw these at the store," he said simply. "You like this kind, right?" I could only manage a soft, "Yes." He smiled and walked away. I looked at that box for days, unopened. It felt like a small, precious secret. After that, I started to notice him more. The way he stood by the window during meetings, his silhouette against the light. The way he would adjust his glasses when deep in thought. The steady, calm tone of his voice, even when the office was chaotic. I wasn't trying to notice these things, it just happened. My notebook at home, once filled with grocery lists, now held fragments of my day. Not diary entries, but moments. The sound of his voice saying, "Good job." The focused expression on his face when he helped someone. The slight curl in his hair on rainy days. These tiny details stayed with me. I knew Daniel was married. A framed photograph sat on his desk. In it, a woman with dark hair stood beside him, her smile bright. A little boy who looked just like Daniel stood in front of them, and a young girl had her arms wrapped tightly around her father's leg. They were in a park, bathed in what looked like warm, late afternoon sun. I would glance at that photo sometimes. It was a constant reminder. This is his life, I would tell myself. He has a family. I never wished to disrupt that. I never fantasized about taking his life and making it my own. I just lived with this quiet feeling. I never spoke of it to anyone. Not my sister, not my colleagues. It was mine alone, a soft, fragile thing I carried with me each day. When he walked past my desk and said, "Good morning, Emily," I would reply, "Good morning," with a small, contained smile. I was careful not to look at him for too long, not to let my eyes follow him across the room. At meetings, my gaze was fixed on the presentation screen. When he told a joke and the room filled with laughter, I would laugh too, but softly, hoping not to draw any attention. Sometimes I stayed late, not to see him, but to be in the office after the bustle had faded. I liked the silence, broken only by the hum of the heater. I liked watching the empty street below as the lights turned to a warm orange. I would finish my work at a leisurely pace, pack my bag, and walk home instead of taking the bus. I took the long route past the bookstore, the old cinema, and the river where people fished in the summer. It was cold, but the walk cleared my head. On weekends, I often went to the park. There was a small lake with ducks and plenty of benches shaded by trees. I would sit with a paper cup of tea and just watch. I watched children chasing each other, couples walking hand in hand, and old men feeding pigeons. Life unfolded all around me, and I felt a sense of peace. I didn't need to be a part of it all. I was content to be an observer. Sometimes my thoughts would drift to Daniel. I wondered what his weekends were like. Maybe he took his children to this very park. Maybe he made pancakes on Sunday mornings. Maybe he read the newspaper with a blanket over his knees. I didn't want to know for sure. I never searched for him on social media. I just wondered. I never asked for this feeling. I didn't go looking for it. It arrived slowly, gently, like a soft rain that begins with a single drop, then another until it's a steady, quiet shower. It wasn't a painful feeling, but it was persistent. It stayed with me. I never wanted anything from him, not his love, not his attention, not his time. I think I just wanted to feel something again. I wanted a reminder that my heart was still capable of it, and for that I was grateful. There was no grand story, no plan, no dramatic ending in sight, just days passing one by one. I went to work. I answered emails. I drank my lemon tea. I saw him walk by. I wrote small things in my notebook. I went home. I made simple dinners of rice or soup. I read for a while. I went to bed. Then I woke up and did it all again. It was a quiet existence, but I wasn't unhappy. I had what I needed. My heart was full in its own small, secret way. I never spoke it. I never explained it. I just carried it with care. Before I continue my story, I need to ask, where are you listening from? Knowing that someone out there hears me, that someone understands, it gives me strength. Winter eventually gave way to spring. The snow melted, and the trees began to bud with green. People opened their windows to the fresh air and placed pots of flowers on their porches. The streets grew livelier. I continued my daily routines, my morning walks, my seat at the same desk. The bakery across the street changed its sign from hot coffee to fresh lemon cake. Life moved forward, slowly but surely. I remained quiet, making no effort to change my circumstances. I just lived. Daniel remained the same as well. He still wore his soft sweaters and carried a black notebook to meetings. He was always one of the first to arrive and one of the last to leave. Occasionally, he would bring in pastries for everyone, leaving them in the break room. "Help yourself if you'd like," he said once, gesturing toward them as he passed my desk. I smiled and said, "Thank you." I waited until he was out of sight before I went to the break room and chose a small, sugar-dusted bun. I ate it at my desk with my tea. It had a simple, sweet taste that seemed to warm the entire room. There were small moments that became etched in my memory. Once I dropped my pen and it rolled under my desk. As I bent down to retrieve it, he had walked over. When I sat back up, he was standing there. He smiled. "Everything okay?" he asked. I said yes, feeling a warmth spread across my face. He lingered for just a second more before returning to his desk. It was nothing, a tiny interaction, but I wrote it down in my notebook that night. Another time, the office printer was jammed. I was struggling to fix it when he came over. "Let me help," he offered. With a simple press of a button, he opened a tray I hadn't seen and smoothly pulled out the crumpled paper. "There you go," he said. As he turned, his hand brushed against mine. It was a complete accident. We both pulled back quickly. He said nothing else, and I returned to my desk. That night, I sat in the dark, watching the rain streak down my window pane. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat with the feeling. Spring turned into a long, warm summer. On some afternoons, the office windows were left open, and the sound of birdsong would drift in. One evening, I was staying late again to finish a report. I thought I was the last one there. Then I heard footsteps and turned to see Daniel. "Still here," he said with a gentle smile. "Just finishing this," I replied. He walked over to the coffee machine, poured himself a cup, and sat at the small table by the window without saying another word. I tried to focus on my typing, but I was acutely aware of his presence in the room. The space between us felt significant, not heavy, but tangible, like a coat you carry but don't wear. After a few minutes, he stood up to leave. He paused at the door and looked back at me. "Don't stay too late, Emily," he said. "Okay," I replied. He left, and I listened to the soft click of the door closing. The sky outside was turning a beautiful shade of pink. I thought about how the quietest feelings can often be the loudest. I saw him outside of work a few times. Once, at the bookstore, he was with his daughter. She was holding a large book about the stars, and he was kneeling beside her, pointing at the illustrations. He looked up and our eyes met. He smiled. I smiled back and quickly moved to another aisle. I couldn't stay. I didn't want to feel any more than I already did. Another time, I was at the park, sitting on my usual bench, when I saw him walking with his wife. They were pushing a stroller, and his son was walking beside them, holding his mother's hand. They looked like a perfect picture, calm, complete, whole. I turned my head to look at the trees and waited for them to pass before I walked home. These moments weren't painful, nor did they give me false hope. They were just memories I collected. I did not dream of anything changing. I did not want to be the cause of anyone's pain. I simply wanted to exist, to feel what I felt, and to carry it with quiet dignity. At work, the invisible line between us remained. I smiled when he spoke to me. I was always polite. I never asked about his family. I kept my eyes on my work, but I listened for the sound of his laugh. I looked up when I heard his footsteps. I noticed the way he touched the edge of his glasses when he was thinking. These were the small treasures I carried home with me. Some nights I would read old novels, stories about people in faraway places who waited, who watched, who loved in silence. I felt a kinship with them. I didn't need a happy ending. I just needed to feel alive. And in my own quiet way, I did. Autumn arrived again, bringing cooler air and golden leaves. The office became busy with new end-of-year projects. Then, one evening, I was working late to finish a report. The office was silent. "You're still here." His voice startled me. He was standing in the doorway of his office. "Almost done," I said. He walked over and sat in the chair across from my desk. For a moment, we sat in silence. Then he looked at me, his expression serious. "You're very good at what you do, Emily," he said. "Thank you," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. "Take care of yourself," he said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. He stood up and walked out. That was the last time we were ever alone together. After that night, things changed. He was still kind, still professional, but a new distance had settled between us. The brief personal questions stopped. We kept our interactions strictly to work. I understood. We had both felt something unspoken, and we both knew it could never be acknowledged. Winter returned, covering the town in a blanket of snow. One evening, sitting by my window with a cup of tea, I opened my notebook and wrote one final line. "Some love is not meant to grow, but it still teaches you how to feel." Then I closed the book for good. I still work in the same office. I still walk the same streets. I still see him sometimes. He still smiles at me and I smile back, but it's different now. The feeling is no longer an active presence, but a quiet, peaceful memory I carry inside me. It didn't give me a grand romance, but it gave me something else. The knowledge that my heart was still awake. And that was enough. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. More emotional and inspiring stories are coming soon.